Aloha SistahGurl, and welcome to another week of SistahGurl Read the Bible, our deep dive series. I am Dr. Arlene Sumpter, and it is my joy and privilege to be with you today. Today we're talking about a subject that we all need to grow in, including your girl Arlene. Yes, I need to grow in this. We're talking about the subject of love. And we're coming from 1 Peter chapter 4, where he talks about how love covers a multitude of sin. Sometimes we take that verse out of context. So I want to take some time today and I want to put it in context so we can be blessed by it and minister to from it, all right? Peter says this, above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sin. Now, girlfriend, if we're going to truly understand this verse, we got to understand who Peter is talking to and why he is saying this. I want you to know that he's not talking to people living on AC Street. He's not talking to people living comfortable lives. Instead, he's writing to believers who are suffering for doing the right thing. According to 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 1, if we just back it up a little bit, he's speaking to Christians in Asia Minor. And these believers are scattered. They're pushed to the margins. They're treated unfairly. They're trying to live holy lives in a world that didn't love God. They were living in close community. They were depending on one another, and they were carrying each other's, heavy emotional weight from their suffering. And at the beginning of chapter 4, Peter tells him to have the same mindset that Christ had as they endure this time of suffering, just as Christ suffered, just as Christ was misunderstood, just as Christ was judged unfairly. Peter wants to remind them that God is the judge of the living and the dead. And so he tells them, before we get to our verse, to be alert, to be sober-minded, to stay prayerful. And then he says, what we're talking about today, above all, don't forget to love, because love covers a multitude of sin. Now, why is Peter saying this? Why is he telling them that love covers a multitude of sin? Well, I know a lot of us, and I said at the beginning of this podcast or teaching that sometimes we take this verse out of context. Sometimes we limit this verse to just forgiving one another. Even when someone keeps hurting us, right? Love covers a multitude of sins, so I got to forgive and forgive and forgive. Well, forgiveness is part of it, but that's not the full meaning of this verse. When we look at the word cover in the Greek, that word gives us so much more clarity. The word cover means to actually do that, to cover, to hide, to conceal, to not expose, to not put on blast, girlfriend. In plain language, what Peter is saying, you don't talk about somebody's mess. You don't air out your sister girl's mess. You don't put it on the front page of social media. Now, I want to say this very clearly so that we don't get this all mixed up. Peter is not saying that we excuse sin. He is not saying that we ignore wrongdoing. He's not saying that we protect toxic behavior or we protect people from being accountable. He is not telling the people, and he's not telling you and I, that we pretend like nothing has ever happened to us when someone sins against us. Or he's not telling us to stay silent about abuse or to protect, predators, or to ignore repentance and truth. That is not biblical love. But what Peter is saying in this Christian community, that love knows how to restrain itself. Love doesn't deny sin, but love doesn't broadcast your sister's sin, your brother's sin. Love doesn't embarrass someone else. Love doesn't humiliate someone. Love doesn't talk about somebody's mistakes or somebody's sin in public or announcements or on the prayer chain, all right? We don't just use that as a gossip link. Sister girl, I want you to remember that the early church was under persecution. They were emotionally tired. They were spiritually stretched, and they were vulnerable to falling apart. And Peter knew this. And he knew that all this pressure sometimes brings out our worst. Sometimes it brings out our flaws. When stress is high in my life and your life, listen, our patience get low, doesn't it? When fear is real in our life, tempers grow short. And Peter knew this. And he knew that if the believers started turning on one another, that the enemy of our soul would have a wide range of attack, would have a wide target. So he responds by telling them to, above all, choose love. Now, let's be clear once again. Peter's not talking to the whole world. He's not talking to people that don't know Christ. He's talking to believers. He's talking to a family, a community of believers. He's talking to people who are walking together in faith, who are doing life together. So, what does that look like for us, Sister Girl? It looks like this. Love refuses to tell everybody about your girlfriend's business. Love chooses to restrain instead of getting revenge. Love protects relationships instead of embarrassing people. Love abuses the offense instead of multiplying the drama. Yes, love doesn't say, let me tell everybody, let me expose you, let me put you on a prayer chain, let me put you on Facebook and Instagram. No, love says, I'm going to handle this in a way that protects you and the community of God. Love doesn't pretend that sin doesn't exist. But love says, I'm not going to let your mistake destroy us. I'm not going to let your mistakes destroy the church. I'm not going to let your mistakes destroy that relationship. And this is why Peter is saying, above all, love one another deeply. Because love doesn't erase sin, but love keeps sin from tearing families apart, relationships apart, churches apart. Love protects and love heals.